Hi. Sorry about that.
No problem at all.
I lose track of time when I'm gardening for some reason.
Forgot what I was gonna say. Last time my internet was kind of in and out, so hopefully it'll work this time. But
Oh yeah, for sure.
all right. I, I'll introduce myself and then you can introduce yourself. So Brennan, who's coming over from the baby side of things. My name's Anina, and I created this account called Nutrition Branch to try to make healthy eating more popular for everyone by making cost-effective recipes and time-saving tips and that sort of thing. And Jamie's created the Boise's first kitchen gardening and consulting business, which is super cool. She does a ton of stuff for our community, which is awesome. Do you want to go into mission and kind of how you started Gold Feather Gardens?
Sure. So I started Gold Feather Gardens last July, so just over a year. I was working in food writing for a good long time and traveling a lot before the pandemic. And then I wasn't doing that anymore. So I was gardening a ton and started training to become a kitchen garden consultant. So I specialize in kitchen gardening, which is raised bed veggie gardening. And I really try to build it into the lifestyle of my clients who I'm building new gardens for. So I do designs and installations for new kitchen gardens. And then I also offer coaching and maintenance for folks who already have raised bed vegetable gardens or who have built new ones. So I'm basically trying to create more confident kitchen gardeners in Boise. I am realizing how much insecurity people have around their gardens, especially this time of year. I was just at a coaching client's house, and I've been doing a lot of coaching because people are getting overwhelmed with the maintenance in their garden in the summer, and just trying to bring it back down to the fundamentals and teach them that once you learn how to maintain the garden, it's not as scary.
Super cool.
Yeah.
And just as a gardener, how has gardening impacted your relationship with food?
I think it's changed everything about how I feel about food. I've worked in local food for a long time, and I managed, opened, operated farmers markets. I've written about local food, and I've been trying to find ways to get just regular folks interested in local food. And I'm finding that once they start gardening, they can't help but think more about where their food comes from. And if I can get them to source their plants locally or their seeds locally, their soil locally, it kind of trickles into other areas of their life. They start to develop relationships with those folks who sell organic local products. And I think that's probably been the biggest change in my life. Is I feel like when I started really gardening just on balconies in Atlanta and Chicago, I started to really think about where my food comes from and who the people are behind it.
That's really cool to how that impacted the way you thought about that.
Yeah.
And I just thought about this as you were talking about kind of your emphasis on local when you're in your garden. Do you like recommend for certain plants like starting with seeds or versus like using a partially grown plant?
Yeah, there's usually a bit of a rule that I use that anything that you're planting a lot of, or that has a short growing season, or that might be really small. So like cilantro is a plant that doesn't take up a lot of space. It has a really short life cycle, and you usually need to plant a lot of it to eat a lot of it. I grow that from seed. So like seed is short and small, so like those S words. And then your transplants, I'll usually go for things that take longer. So like right now we're planting cabbage, cauliflower, kale. It just takes a lot longer to mature. So anything that has a long duration or is large, like your tomatoes get really large or your peppers, I'll plant those as transplants.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. And then just since this account's mission is to make healthy eating more affordable and that sort of thing, do you have
Yeah.
any tips or strategies to make healthy eating more affordable? And I know you talked a little bit about CSAs last time, if you want to touch on that again.
Yeah. I was telling Nina that I track our grocery budget every week and I can see how it tracks over the course of the year. And I have found that the months where I have RCSA, our grocery bill is actually cut in half because I'm not going to the store all the time and buying like extraneous things. I'm just really trying to use what we have in our CSA box. And really, I think that buying local fruits and vegetables, buying things in large quantities, you can save a lot of money by doing that. Usually, farmers are trying to unload everything that they've picked. And so, if you know your family eats a lot of tomato sauce or your family eats a lot of blueberry jam, trying to buy those things in bulk um, is a really great way to save some money and stay on budget. We do a beef share, so we split a quarter of a cow with another family. So we have an eighth of a cow, and that it's local, organic, grass-fed beef, and it's, maybe 30% off what you would pay for the same animal, same farm in the store too.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then I forgot what I was going to ask. Something from what you said, but I'll come back to it. And so a lot of what you were referencing on your website, and from what I've noticed about you, is your emphasis on sustainable farming and supporting local. Why do you think that's important to you, and just why would you think it's important for other people?
Yeah, I think we're lucky enough to live in a city where a lot of people care about the environment, and unfortunately we don't feel like we have a lot of control over what's going on because there are other people and corporations and things like that who have more control than we do, but we get to control what grows in our own space, and that's actually a really great way to contribute to the environment and to redirect resources. I use this example sometimes that, like, when you're driving up to Bogus Basin and you hit the tree line, you immediately see like the temperature on your dash go down, and it's part of it's because you're higher up, but a larger part of it is because of how green it is at the tree line, of how much carbon is sequestered, how much cooler the temperature is. And so if you, especially in Boise, we have like a lot of xeriscaping and a lot of like rock, or even just your lawn, which is like a really short plant. Your lawn is like grass is a really short plant. By growing gardens, we can actually cool our yards and cool our neighborhoods if everybody does it. So that's kind of why I want to build community in this way, is I think it's not only, an active way you can participate in like promoting the environment and really taking back some control over our environment, but it's also starts to invade other choices that you make. Supporting local businesses or supporting local farmers is a huge way to impact our environment. By buying from larger farms that aren't local to us, you're sending more money into the supply chain and less into our communities. And so I think if we can really build our community with gardens in mind, we'll all just be making better choices in general.
Cool. It's a good way to think about it. And then for people who are starting to garden for the first time, or maybe feel like they just don't have a green thumb, where would you tell them to start?
Start with seeds. Seeds are cheap, and you get like 300 of them when you buy a seed packet. And it's just a great way to experiment, that if you don't have a lot of space, you don't have a lot of resources, just buying a seed packet, a small container, and good quality soil, and just really babying that container, you can learn a lot about growing. When I set up gardens, have a system in my setup of like the best quality and deepest container that I can get. So usually for my beds, I do 2 feet deep. The best quality soil that I can get, and the best quality plants. And then I love automated watering systems because they save water and time and frustration, and they're better for plants. But if you can't do that, just staying consistent on your watering schedule, using that system, even on a small scale, like a little patio plant, all the way up to like a full scale garden. If you garden that way, and just keep planting and keep practicing, you're going to learn new things every time and find success. And I was in a garden like just before this, and she had said that she never got her eggplants to grow. She never got cucumbers to grow. Her basil was a dud last year. And this year we lost a lot of peppers. Our peppers didn't grow in there, and our onions didn't grow. But we pulled maybe 20 cucumbers out of there just today, and like 10 eggplant and tons of basil. And so it's like you're always going to have wins and losses, and it's not your fault. It's just that's nature. That's nature's nature, you know.
That's a good way to think about it too. And so it seems like you put a lot of emphasis on using gardening beds. What advantages there to that, like as compared to like planting in the ground or that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I talk to a lot of people who plant in ground, and who are just frustrated by it. It's a really uncomfortable way of gardening. First of all, you spend 99% of your gardening time battling weeds. Your bug pressure is a lot worse, and your plants just don't, you can't get as much out of your space. So what I really like about raised beds is you have complete control over what goes into them, soil wise and water wise. And then you also have a lot of control over how much you can plant, because like if you plant in a raised bed that's 20 to 28 inches deep, like almost 2 to 3 feet deep, there's so much more room for the root systems to find sources of nutrition and all sorts of stuff. So you can really pack it in. Like the garden I was working on today is just one 4x8 bed, and she has like an insane amount of stuff in there. And no, we didn't pull a single weed. Like that was not, we just spent 90 minutes working on that garden, and there was not a single weed in there. So for folks who are just frustrated by weeding and bending over and water running off, like I think raised beds are a great way to have success in the garden and spend time in there that's like good, joyful time and not frustrating time, because if you're frustrated in the garden, you'll neglect it, and then you'll just not want to do it anymore.
Would you say that having a raised bed helps keep like rabbits and that sort of thing out too? Is that an additional benefit?
Yeah, it's kind of tough in Boise. Like I have some gardens in the foothills that we struggle with deer, we struggle with gophers and rabbits. And there's a lot that you can do with covering your beds or like creating enclosures for your garden areas, and having a raised bed with that perimeter is a really great way to go. I don't see a lot of rabbits like jumping up into beds. They have to be pretty industrious, but the deer will definitely walk by and nibble on stuff. So
Yeah.
if you notice deer, it's always good to enclose the garden space.
Okay. And then for soil quality, especially with a lot of people here having like clay in their soil or lots of rock, how do you optimize that soil quality? And is a raised bed one of the ways to have better soil?
Yeah, the raised bed is the fastest way to grow faster. Like I have an in-ground garden on the other side of our fence that I share with my neighbors, and then I have an above ground, a raised bed garden on this side of the fence. So I really get to like see what the differences are on a regular basis. And like my raised bed garden, the soil is so much more protected. Like I said, I don't have weeds. I had full control of like what went into that bed. So it's like, one second. I have like a timer on my Instagram, so I don't spend too much time on it.
Oh, I have that too.
Yeah, so basically I can control what goes into that bed. Versus my in-ground garden, we have built it up over the last, I think this is our third season growing in it. We planted sunflowers first to leach any heavy metals out of the soil. We've been covering it in compost. I just have to use a lot more resources to get stuff out of that ground. It's a huge challenge, and it's something that you have to build over time. But the raised bed situation is, for us, a really hands-off approach that we plant it, we tend to it, a few minutes a day or an hour a week, and that's all we do, versus my in-ground garden, I have to be out there for hours to get it to look and do what I need it to do.
So you talked a little bit last time too about kind of adding the nutrients into the soil as much as you
Mhm.
can. What were those specific like things you added to the soil and to optimize soil quality?
Yeah, so because we have in half the valley we're really clayey, half the valley we're really sandy. It depends on where you're at, but I will usually use compost, good organic aged compost from like a local organic nursery. I typically don't source from like a lot of, I usually don't use like the city compost or like recycling centers. It takes a while to figure out where the good compost is, but North End Nursery is a good standard place to go if you need bulk compost. I use that to build up my soil over time. It's a really it's hard because a lot of like scientific folks will tell you to get a soil sample, send it to the lab, which can be expensive, and then add what you need to add. I don't find plants to be that complicated, I guess, is I'll add compost because it's a really even, balanced soil additive that basically improves the composition of your soil. It doesn't have quite as much nutrition, but it really helps with the composition, and that's really what we're battling with when we're battling with clay and sand.
Okay.
The nutrition of the soil is something that you kind of develop over time with different plants and all sorts of things.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then is there a certain vegetable or vegetables that you would say are easier to grow or start out with growing?
totally. I have like a continuum of like, I usually start people on herbs and like salad greens. Those are the plants that need the least amount of space, water, time, nutrition. They're like the plants that you could definitely neglect if you are new to gardening or if you're experimenting. Um, Salad greens are really easy to grow from seed, so they're cheap. And then herbs, it's hard. They're kind of hard to kill. I've definitely killed some herbs, but they can be more expensive. And then from there, you have your root vegetables and your fruiting vegetables. So like your root vegetables are like your radish, turnip, carrot, beet varieties,
Mhm.
and then your fruiting vegetables are your like tomato, peppers, eggplant. Um, those are more complicated. They have a little bit more nuance to them, and they're usually larger, more expensive plants too. So they usually need more water, more space, more time, more nutrition versus like your herbs and greens are a really awesome place to start, and they're really high impact. So like if you cook a lot, which I do, a lot of
Mhm.
people I know who garden will cook a lot, your herbs, those are probably some of the most expensive vegetables at the grocery store for like what you get. You get half an ounce or an ounce for like $6. Um, Versus if you grow them in your garden, which is not hard to do, they don't take up a lot of space. You get high impact from them, and then your greens as well. Like your greens in the grocery store are going to be one of your most sprayed, one of your most delicate um, areas for waste and things like that. Versus when you grow them in your garden, they grow really prolifically. They're really easy to tend to, and you can eat them pretty much like every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd imagine that like buying lettuce at a grocery store would require lots of water to like clean it and everything, whereas saying that gardening it's like a plant that requires relatively minimal water. So that's interesting.
Well, and you get so much more room for like you were seeing all these outbreaks, right? For like listeria or like different bacterias in lettuces because of the water, because they're wet when they're packaged, and so they like breed bacteria versus if you grow them outside your door and you cut them, bring them inside, wash them and eat them, like there's no
Yeah,
space for bacteria to grow.
that's good to think about. And then I was wondering, can you grow herbs like indoors? Or
Yeah. The hard part about sometimes about growing indoors is your light source. If you've got good light setup, there's a lot of like countertop herb growing kits that you can get that work really well. Otherwise, I'll usually bring my herbs in in the winter time. Like I'll bring in my rosemary or like things that I know won't make it through the winter, and they'll just kind of go dormant indoors. But it's really hard to control indoor lighting, I guess, for plants without some good quality lights.
So maybe like, would it work by a window or no? Just in
I've
the
done it. I've done it by a window and I haven't had great success. I think even if you have like a balcony or like a front door, um, that gets some like basically what happens inside is that like in this room I have no natural light around me at all versus like something on a window, it's only getting natural light from one side,
Okay.
and when something's outside it's getting natural light from like all sides is kind of the theory there.
Okay. I just remembered my question from earlier. I was wondering
Yeah.
if if like you have ever tried something really interesting that you had never tried before through the CSA,
Oh
or
man.
or what we.
um yeah, I feel like kohlrabi is always the one that gets people. That's probably the most common like freaky vegetable that people are like weird about. It's basically like a root vegetable. It's a type of cabbage. It's like in the cabbage family, and it kind of has like the texture of like jicama. It's like the texture of like an apple, but it's not sweet. It's like more green in flavor, more like herby in flavor, but the texture is really, really nice. And it kind of grows. It looks like a little alien. It's like a little ball that has this like weird purple like peel on it, and then it grows like big leaves, like kale leaves, kind of cabbage leaves. So that's one that most CSAs have to like educate people on. Otherwise, there's always what I think is the most fun about CSAs is like your farmers are always experimenting with different varieties of plants that you normally don't get to see. That like an eggplant, for instance, or like a summer squash, like a zucchini, instead of just getting your standard like globe purple eggplant or green like big zucchini, they're growing zephyr squashes, which are like multicolors or stripes, or some of them are sweeter or more tender. And like your eggplant, like your fairy tale eggplant or like your Thai eggplants, um, are like skinnier and longer. Like I really didn't like eggplant. I haven't liked a lot of vegetables until I tried them in a CSA or from a local farm, because I just didn't know how to eat them properly. And I wasn't sure what to expect. But now it's, every time I get something different, it's just fun to experiment.
Yeah, a little bit of an adventure.
Yeah.
Do you have any like specific resources that you'd recommend for people getting started, whether it be like a book or a channel or that sort of thing?
Yeah. My like I'm a big literature person. I am a writer, and I'm always reading books that have to do with gardening or food, even if it's just like in the plot, not necessarily about it. But Barbara Kingsolver wrote a book called Animal Vegetable Miracle that is what started me on my like local food journey. I recommend that book to everyone who asks me. I really love the basically she it's a nonfiction book that she wrote about her family moving to like a family farm, and for an entire year only eating everything that they ate was either from that farm or like bartered with a neighbor nearby. So it was like a hyper local experience. And she just has a really wonderful way of talking about local food and the impact of it in a way that's not super like textbooky or article-y. I think that's a really good one. I think that there's a ton of books on gardening. I will say that there's not a whole lot of like there's a lot of science around it, like around horticulture and botany and all that stuff. But um, for me, it's about the mission that like I will always talk with my clients about like what you want to get out of this garden. Is it an experience away from the TV with your family? Is it high productivity because you want to support your family on this garden? Is it just a place to like take in some natural beauty, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so I think with literature and all that sort of stuff, it's really easy to find your type of gardening in that too. Yeah.
That's good enough. And then I guess my last question for you is if someone here wanted to learn more about your business or potentially like have a garden consultation, what would
Yeah.
you say to them?
Yeah, so I have a website, and it's goldfeathergardens.com, and then obviously my Instagram on here too. All of those have booking links to me, but I'm also going to teach a workshop at North End Nursery on August 14th, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to be raffling off a new garden consult. My consult fees are pretty high just because of how much time they take to create and put together. But it's also, I'm, really trying to find people who are really serious about putting in a garden and, just kind of hit the ground running because there's such limited supply and like
Yeah.
labor and things like that right now. But I was running a summer promotion that I extended as well. That's like $100 off a consult, and basically the booking code for that is just summer in all caps.
Okay.
If anybody wants to use that too. But yeah, my website has tons more information on what a consult entails and includes and kind of what my process is.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else you want to add, or if anyone has questions, they can add them too?
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I think we live in a very unique place for growing food. I think those are probably the questions I run into the most is people just don't understand how long our growing season is. I grew up in the Chicago area where for 6 months out of the year you can't grow anything. So the fact that I now live someplace where I can have something in the garden all year round is pretty incredible, and I think something that not a lot of people understand.
That is really special.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you again for
Yeah.
to come back after the
Anytime.
time. It's really nice of you and really generous.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you doing this. It's really nice.
Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
I'll be sure to share this video for anyone who wasn't able to join.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Amanda.